The hotel lobby gleamed under the warm light, its marble floors reflecting the chandelier's shine. As the sun rose higher, Richard knelt on the ground, cleaning the floor with a mop that looked worn from years of use. In his faded uniform, he was not just a janitor. He was a man with dreams buried deep beneath layers of routine and responsibilities. Richard had worked at the Grand Lux Hotel for almost 10 years. Day in and day out, he watched luxury cars roll up, their drivers stepping out in crisp suits, all smiles and laughter. He cleaned up after glitzy events, listening to snippets of laughter and stories that felt like a world away from his own. Every swipe of his mop squeaked against the polished surface, echoing the rhythm of a life that felt monotonously predictable. Each day brought a new wave of guests, but he always remained invisible. Richard didn't mind the work itself. He took pride in a job well done. It was the moments in between that tugged at his heart. He thought of his son Ethan, who was now in high school, his dreams drifting towards becoming a race car driver. Richard dreamt of exciting cars just like the ones he saw at the hotel, but life had dealt him a hand that left little room for such fantasies. On this particular morning, as he mopped, he caught a glimpse of something shiny outside the hotel's entrance. A sleek black sports car had pulled up, paint glistening like polished glass. It had to be one of the most expensive models out there. With the valet standing at attention, the driver emerged, a man in a stylish suit, shades on, exuding barely contained confidence. Richard's heart fluttered. He used to imagine himself in one of those cars as a kid, racing down the streets of his small town. "Hey, buddy," the valet called out playfully, a smirk on his face. Richard chuckled, a warm smile breaking through his usual seriousness. He replied, though he felt the sting of embarrassment creep into his cheeks. The valet's banter felt like a reminder of a bitter truth. Richard wasn't wearing a suit or driving a fancy car. He was just the man behind the mop. Moments later, he finished cleaning that section of the lobby, leaving it fresh and glowing. He admired his work before moving on to the next area. Just then, a high-pitched laugh rang out and he glanced over. A group of guests wearing expensive jewelry and rich fabrics were enjoying a champagne brunch. Laughter mixed with the clinking of glasses created a melody that was both beautiful and haunting. As he wiped down tables, Richard overheard snippets of their conversations. Stories of far-off vacations, of life in high-rise apartments, and dreams that seemed a world away from his own. He tightened his grip on the mop, letting the words wash over him. The sound of laughter greeted his ears like a reminder of everything he felt he had sacrificed. Occasionally, Richard would catch a glimpse of the valet returning to the sports car. Each time, his heart sank a little deeper. It wasn't just envy. It was disappointment for a life unlived. Would things ever change? Would he ever drive a car like that? The dreams of his youth felt so distant, almost like fairy tales told long ago. Just as he lost himself in those thoughts, the valet approached him, a more serious look marring his earlier cheeriness. "Hey, Richard," he said, lowering his voice. Richard looked up, curiosity piquing his interest. The guy in that black sports car, he was supposed to take it to the garage, but there was a change of plans. They're flying out this afternoon and they need someone to take it for a spin around the block. Richard blinked, processing the words, "take the car for a spin." His pulse quickened, but was the valet joking? He looked at the valet's serious expression and realized he was dead serious. He stuttered, his heart racing. The valet said, grinning broadly. Richard felt the weight of disbelief settle over him. The thought of sitting in that car, of touching that leather interior, made him feel both excited and terrified. "I don't know, man," he said, wiping his sweaty palms on his uniform. The valet waved a hand dismissively. "Just take it slow. You've got this." Richard stole another glance at the sleek machine waiting at the entrance, its tinted windows gleaming in the sun. His hands trembled slightly as he imagined gripping the steering wheel, feeling the horsepower beneath him. A flicker of hope ignited within him, a desire to experience something out of the ordinary, to feel the thrill of speed and freedom. He took a deep breath, glancing at the valet's encouraging nod. How could he pass up this once-in-a-lifetime chance? "Okay," Richard said, his voice shaking with excitement. The valet said, leading him to the car. As Richard approached the car, he was awestruck. The interior was like nothing he had ever seen. The luxurious leather, the polished dashboard, all seemed to whisper stories of speed and adventure. He opened the door and climbed inside, the smell of fresh leather filling his senses. He felt like a kid again, brimming with excitement as he adjusted the seat and gripped the steering wheel, trembling with anticipation. The valet gave him a few pointers about the controls, explaining the features with an animated excitement. Richard could barely focus on the instructions. Adrenaline coursed through him like electricity. With a flick of the wrist, he pressed the start button. The engine roared to life, an exhilarating growl that vibrated beneath his fingertips. His heart raced. He was a man of ordinary dreams, about to dive into something extraordinary. The valet gave him a thumbs up, stepping back as Richard put the car into gear. He pulled out of the hotel driveway, the tires softly gripping the pavement. As he turned onto the street, the world transformed. The ordinary cityscape became a blur of life. He could feel the power of the car beneath him, an energy he'd never experienced before. With each turn of the wheel, a smile crept onto his face, a smile he thought he had forgotten existed. Richard drove slowly at first, soaking in the sensations. The wind tousled his hair, and he could hardly believe this was happening. He passed stores and cafes, the sounds of the city wrapping around him like a warm blanket. This wasn't just a car, it was an escape, a reminder that life could still be thrilling. But then something inside him shifted. The thrill spread through him and he pressed down on the accelerator. The car surged forward and his heart leaped into his throat. The rush was magical. The world outside became a whirlwind. He was no longer just a janitor wiping floors. He was a driver on the road to his own adventure. As Richard rounded a corner, he saw a group of kids playing by the sidewalk. Their heads turned, eyes wide with wonder as they caught sight of the sleek car racing past. Their joy pulled at something deep within him, a reminder of the dreams he once had. What would they think if they knew a janitor was behind the wheel? Suddenly, he felt a rush of nostalgia. Confident and free, he pushed the car harder, feeling every bump in the road as if he were conquering them. Laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep within him, echoing in harmony with the humming engine. But just as quickly, reality knocked gently at the door of his bliss. He couldn't forget who he was and where he came from. How long could he escape? With that thought, a wave of anxiety washed over him. Could he really mix dreams with everyday life? Would getting a taste of this thrill bring more heartache than joy when reality set back in? He felt torn between exhilaration and the weight of his own circumstances. Richard steered the car back toward the hotel slowly, his heart still racing but now with a sobering clarity. The valet awaited his return, a look of excitement plastered across his face. "How was it?" he asked, practically vibrating with energy. Richard couldn't help but grin. "It was amazing," he admitted, reflecting on the adrenaline that had surged through his veins. He felt lighter somehow, filled with a hope he hadn't noticed in years. Brief moment he had tasted a different life, one of speed and adventure. As he parked the car back in its spot, a wave of emotions began to wash over him. He may have returned to reality, but something inside him had changed forever. He stepped out of the car, a newfound determination pulsing through him. Maybe it was time to work harder for his dreams, to push through the monotony and reach for something brighter. "Thanks, man," he said to the valet with genuine gratitude. The valet chuckled. "You smashed it, Lucky." The word lingered in Richard's mind as he returned to his routine. He mopped the floors that day with a smile, the heavy burden on his heart lightening just a little. Maybe it was all right to dream again, to feel excitement for the future. Behind him, each sound in the lobby, a laugh, a conversation, the tolling of a bell felt like music. With every splash of water from the mop, Richard wiped away not just the dirt from the floor, but the doubts in his heart. Life wasn't just about surviving, it was also about living, and maybe, just maybe, there lay hope in those little moments when dreams brushed against the fabric of reality. And that, above all else, would keep him going through those long hours and days ahead. The lobby floor sparkled in the early morning light as Richard knelt down, his mop gliding across the surface like a dancer in a ballet. Just an ordinary day, or so he thought. Around him, the grand chandelier hung high above, casting a soft glow that illuminated the space where laughter and luxury mingled daily. But Richard was part of the invisible team, the unsung heroes who kept the Grand Lux Hotel looking pristine. With each sweep of the mop, his mind wandered. He could hear the laughter of the guests, the clinking of champagne glasses from a lavish brunch they were hosting that day. Smiling faces rushed past, draped in designer suits and beautiful gowns, while Richard stayed low, an unseen figure in a faded uniform, wet hair tied back, with a tired face marked by determination. For 10 long years he had worked here, watching the world of luxury unfold just beyond his reach. His dreams, once vibrant and filled with ambition, had grown dull, like the mop he used to wipe the floor. Richard had once been the kind of boy who believed anything was possible, but over time, life had convinced him otherwise. He thought of his young son, Ethan, who dreamed of becoming a race car driver, and Richard felt a pang in his heart. How could he encourage his son's wild dreams when his own had withered? As he moved across the lobby, Richard caught sight of the valet, a dapper young man with a charming smile and an easy confidence that seemed effortless. It was easy to see how respect came naturally to him, like the gravity that pulled people toward the stars. Suddenly, a sleek black sports car pulled up outside, its engine growling like a predator. It was one of those luxury models that made heads turn. The sunlight glinted off its polished surface, and Richard's heart raced at the sight. He felt a familiar spark of longing. Alex called out, breaking him from his daydream. Richard chuckled, trying to shake off the twinge of envy that gripped him. "Just doing my job, man. Yeah, you're making us all look bad," Alex teased. Richard shook his head but couldn't hide the flicker of hope in his eyes. Not these days. Just then the car door opened and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, looking more like a character from a movie than a regular hotel guest. He hopped out, confidence radiating from him. He stepped over to Alex, handing him the keys with a knowing smile. It was the kind of confidence that left a mark, a kind of aura that said he owned the world. Richard wiped his brow, envy twinging in his chest once more. The rich seemed to live in a different universe where dreams met reality without resistance. But then Alex looked at Richard, an excited gleam sparkling in his eye. "No," Richard replied, his heart quickening at the idea. Alex tilted his head, curiosity dancing on his lips. "Me?" Richard found himself laughing nervously. "Come on, you've got to see what it feels like." Before Richard could respond, Alex jogged over to the valet stand, pulling out a clipboard and began filling in some notes. Richard shook his head in disbelief. Was this a prank, a joke? But moments later, Alex came bounding back, clasping his hands together. "Okay, listen up. The owner of that car is flying out this afternoon. They need someone to take it to the garage." Richard stammered, his mind racing. "Don't think too much about it. Just take it around the block." Richard's heart thundered in his chest. What was he saying? It was almost laughable. "I can't do that. What if I mess up?" Alex waved away his worries, grinning. "You won't. Just think of it like this. It's an adventure. Life's too short to play it safe." The thought of speeding through the streets, holding the steering wheel of luxury in his hands, ignited something in Richard, a flicker that had long been extinguished. Perhaps it was time to shake off the weight of routine. Breath, Richard finally nodded. "Okay." Alex's excitement was infectious. "Great." Richard followed Alex outside, and every step felt heavier with anticipation. As they approached the parked car, the world around him seemed to blur. The car glinted in the sunlight, a treasure waiting to be discovered. He climbed inside, his fingers trembling as they brushed the leather seats. It was unreal. Alex instructed, leaning against the passenger seat. Richard took a deep breath, his heart racing. He pressed the ignition button. The engine roared to life, vibrating powerfully beneath him. The very sound filled him with exhilaration and dread. "Just ease into it," Alex said, a mix of encouragement and excitement flooding his voice. Richard nodded, steeling himself as he shifted into gear. With a cautious press of the accelerator, he pulled out onto the road. The world outside shifted into a blur, streetlights flickering like stars, with buildings lining the streets like towering giants. As he drove down the boulevard, a sense of exhilaration washed over him. He felt the car respond to his every move, an extension of his own desires and dreams. The power between his fingers was intoxicating. He glanced over at Alex, who wore an expression of sheer joy, the kind of bliss that fed into Richard's newfound thrill. "See," Alex cheered, urging him to push a little harder. An urge surged through Richard. The road opened up before him, and he pressed down on the gas pedal just a little more. The engine roared and the car shot forward. Every worry and doubt washed away as the wind whipped through his hair. It wasn't just a car, it was freedom. For those fleeting moments, he was no longer Richard the janitor. He was Richard the driver, a man unbound. But as the exhilaration peaked, doubt clawed its way back into his heart. He thought, what if he were to ruin this golden opportunity, to dash aside something beautiful? There was no room for error when it came to the lives of others. Alex coaxed him, sensing the shift. "You've got this." Suddenly, Richard spotted a group of kids playing on the sidewalk. They stopped, eyes wide, mouths agape as they saw the sleek beauty zoom past. Something stirred deep inside him, a longing to share this moment with his son. A quick flash of Ethan's carefree laughter, his wide smile as he dreamt of racing. Richard pressed on the brakes, slowing down, letting the kids admire the car as they cheered and waved. It felt electric. Yet as the sound of laughter resonated, the reality of his life seeped back in. This was only a moment. Soon he would return to the monotony of sweeping the floor. He could already feel it, the weight of normalcy pressing back down. Alex shouted, snapping Richard back to the moment. He shifted the car and turned, but the hesitation made him second-guess himself. Suddenly, the feeling of exhilaration spiraled into anxiety. He could feel his hands tensing on the wheel, heart pounding loudly enough that he could barely hear anything else. Alex encouraged, but Richard could feel the specter of failure loom large. What if he crashed? What if he lost everything? The miles felt heavy as he navigated the streets, the once thrilling experience now tinged with self-doubt. He pressed the pedal harder, trying to quiet the doubts, but it wasn't working. He wouldn't dare let fear control him, but it was hard to shake off. Finally, he knew he had to turn back to face what lay waiting at the hotel. As they drove toward the Grand Lux, Richard's heart sank. His moment of freedom was coming to an end. The mix of exhilaration and despair left him breathless as he parked the car, his chest tightening. Alex grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. "You did amazing." Richard stepped out, his heart still racing, but a different mix of emotions flooding him now. He murmured, clarity washing over him like an early morning mist. It was incredible, but it felt so temporary. "It's never just temporary if you make it count," Alex said, his voice firm with conviction. "Every moment like this teaches us something. You might wipe floors, but you can also dream." Standing there, Richard felt the enormity of those words. It was true. Life was about more than just what he saw. His dreary routine didn't have to define him. He could strive for something more, much more. Slowly, a smile crept onto his face. He might never own a luxury car or live in a mansion, but there was a fire inside him now. A spark ignited. Maybe it wasn't about the car at all, but what it represented: freedom, ambition, a life fully lived. The weight of years melted with each step he took as he walked back into the hotel. The lobby floor glistened like a promise, the laughter of guests echoing around him like a melody. Maybe today had only been a fleeting moment, but it lit a fire he thought had gone cold long ago. Richard began mopping again, but this time it felt different. Each stroke of the mop felt like writing his own story instead of just cleaning up after others. He moved with purpose, fueled by the thrill of the day, ready to embrace whatever came next. The mundane lost its grip, transforming into a canvas waiting for color. And just like that, Richard decided he would embrace the dreams he'd buried for far too long. Who knows, one day he might drive a luxury car again. But for now, mopping the floor felt like the first step towards something infinitely greater. Life painted in vibrant strokes, a journey, not an end. He was wiping the lobby floor, the familiar swish of the mop echoing in the grand space of the hotel. The tapestry of life unfolded around him, the whispers of laughter, the rich scent of freshly polished wood, and the glimmer of the chandelier above. Richard knelt there, his faded uniform clinging to him like a reminder of dreams long forgotten. He had seen it all through the haze of daily monotony, yet today felt different. The morning light poured in through the glass doors, illuminating a sleek black sports car parked out front. It looked like something out of a movie, a metal beast purring softly as its engine idled. Richard stole a glance, heart racing. This car belonged to a world he didn't inhabit, a world of luxury and glamour where men twirled in tailored suits and women glided past in shimmering dresses. Just as he turned away, the valet strolled by, a youthful grin on his face. Alex called, casually tossing a set of keys in the air. Richard laughed, wiping the mop against the floor with more force than necessary. "In my dreams, maybe. Reality is what you make of it," Alex replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. "You're here every day, working hard." Richard brushed aside the comment, focusing on the mop, but beneath that veneer of routine, something stirred. A flicker of envy pulled at him, a familiar ache for the excitement of life outside these walls. He caught sight of the black beauty again. It looked unyielding, like a dragon waiting to be awakened. "I should get back to work," Richard said, veiling his longing, but Alex wouldn't let it go that easily. "Come on, just think about it." And there it was, the suggestion hung in the air, mingling with the aroma of coffee and pastry from the nearby cafe. A chance to feel alive again, an opportunity to experience something beyond the haze of chores and worn-out dreams. Could he, should he? Before Richard could even process his thoughts, a commotion rose at the entrance. The sporty car's owner had returned, a man in his late 30s, dressed to impress. His hair was slicked back, and he moved with the kind of confidence that turned heads. With a flourish, he stepped out, handing Alex the keys with a casual wave. The kind of nonchalance that said this was just another day in his charmed life. Alex called out, stopping the man mid-stride. The man raised an eyebrow, surprised but amused. Alex said, nudging Richard forward. The man's eyes flicked over Richard, taking in the mop in one hand and the determination in the other. He shrugged good-naturedly. Richard stood frozen, an avalanche of disbelief and excitement crashing over him. The black car shimmered invitingly, beckoning him closer. He felt the pulse of possibility rush through his veins. This was the stuff of dreams. He managed to stammer. It was as if he'd been set adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Was he really about to take a luxury car for a spin? Alex, sensing his hesitation, jostled him playfully. "Come on, get in." With shaky hands, Richard climbed into the car, the scent of leather wrapping around him like a warm embrace. The driver's seat fit like a glove, and he marveled at the dashboard, buttons glinting like jewels in the sun. This wasn't just a car, it was a raw, untamed beast waiting for him to take control. "Buckle up," Alex said, settling into the passenger seat, eyes bright with excitement. Richard's heart raced as he pressed the ignition button. The engine roared to life with a sound that sent shivers down his spine. He felt the power vibrating through him, an electric thrill coursing through his veins, but then it hit him, a wave of panic mixed with exhilaration. What if he crashed? What if he didn't know how to handle this beast? It was just a car, yet it represented everything he dreamed of, everything he wished to be. "Just breathe," Alex advised, a comforting hand resting on Richard's shoulder. "Feel the wheel." With one last deep breath, Richard shifted the gear and the car glided forward. The world outside blurred as he drove onto the street, the sound of the engine drowning everything else out. It felt surreal, like stepping into a different universe. He pressed down gently on the gas, coaxing the car to pick up speed. With each mile, Richard felt freer. The adrenaline surged, and he began to navigate the streets with growing confidence. Passers-by turned their heads, eyes wide with wonder as he sped past. He was no longer just a janitor, he was a driver, living the dream. As he took a turn, laughter bubbled from his lips. The taste of freedom was intoxicating, washing away years of toil and sacrifice. The car glided along, a symphony composed of roaring engines and the wind rushing past. Time stretched, becoming fluid as he embraced the open road, exhilaration bubbling up within him. But as he approached an intersection, a creeping sense of reality dampened his joy. He was still Richard, the janitor. He couldn't get lost in this fantasy. What if he made a mistake? The thought tightened around his chest like a vice. In that moment of self-doubt, Richard heard Alex's voice, steady and encouraging. "You got this." With renewed determination, he pushed aside the weight of fear and reminded himself why he was there, to taste life outside the ordinary. He steered the car effortlessly, weaving through the streets, exulting in the challenge. But then, as he reached the end of a straightaway, a flash of red light caught his eye. A stop sign loomed ahead and Richard's heart dropped. He slammed on the brakes, but not before a surge of panic shot through him. Would he stop in time? The screech of tires echoed in his ears. The car did a slight skid before coming to a halt. Richard's breath hitched as they barely avoided a collision. The rush of adrenaline mixed with fear, causing his heart to thunder like a bass drum. Alex shouted, gripping the dashboard. Yeah, Richard stammered, heart racing. Reviewing the moment, he realized the fragility of freedom. One wrong move could send him spiraling back into the mundane, back to the reality he tried so hard to escape. As they took a breath, Richard shook off the fear. Okay. He inhaled deeply, determined to finish the ride. With newfound resolve, he maneuvered the car back toward the hotel, weaving through familiar streets. What had begun as a whimsical adventure was morphing into an exploration of his own limits. The once daunting walls of his life began to feel less confining. It was a chance to rediscover himself. Finally, as he turned onto the street that led back to the Grand Lux Hotel, Richard felt the weight of the experience settle into his bones. The rush and thrill lingered, buoying him with an energy he hadn't felt in years. As they pulled up in front of the hotel, Richard parked the car, the engine still purring softly as he turned it off. The enormity of what he just accomplished washed over him like a wave. For those blissful moments, he tasted freedom, a taste that ignited the flickering embers of his dreams. Alex exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with pride. Richard sat still for a moment, still trying to grasp the magnitude of the experience. It was incredible, he managed, a shy smile breaking through. He felt something shift inside him, a flicker of purpose reigniting. As they climbed out, Richard turned to the car one last time, soaking in the beauty, the power, and the promise it held. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a symbol that anything could change, that dreams could break free from the chains of routine. Back inside the lobby, days of mopping floors felt different. The lobby glowed with the same familiar shimmer, yet Richard saw it through new eyes. Each sweep of the mop became a movement in his new symphony of life. Every laugh, every moment, everything began to feel seamless, intertwined with possibility. Just then, as if on cue, the owner of the luxury car appeared, a satisfied smile on his face. He asked, genuinely curious. Richard felt the rush of gratitude as he glanced back at Alex, feeling buoyed by the kindness and chance he had nearly passed up. It was everything I needed and more, he said truthfully. Glad to hear it, the man replied, nodding appreciatively. And in that moment, Richard knew he had unlocked something within himself, the knowledge that dreams don't die, they simply wait to be reignited. Each day was a new opportunity, waiting for him to take the wheel. With renewed focus, he returned to his work, heart lighter and spirit soaring. No longer the janitor confined to the routine, he embraced the path ahead. Each day carried the taste of freedom, each moment an invitation to rediscover joy. Life had unleashed its grip on him, and for the first time in a long time, he believed in the adventure ahead. The luxury of living had been delivered, not in a car, but in the spirit of embracing every moment, wiping the floors and racing through life, ready to seize whatever came next. He was wiping the lobby floor when he heard the unmistakable growl of a luxury car engine roar outside. Richard paused mid-swipe, mop in hand, his heart racing at the sound. Just beyond the marbled entrance of the Grand Lux Hotel, a sleek sports car pulsed with energy. It was like a wild animal waiting to be unleashed, and it brought a rush of excitement coursing through him. Richard glanced up, noticing the usual bustle, guests in tailored suits and elegant dresses gliding by, laughter and chatter filling the air. He felt suspended between two worlds, the mundane routine of his day-to-day life and the shimmering dream that sparkled just outside the glass doors. For a moment, he let himself imagine what it would be like to be in that car, to feel the raw power of it beneath his hands. Alex, the hotel valet, called out playfully as he strutted past, a grin plastered on his face. Still cleaning floors, Richard chuckled softly, forcing a smile. Just trying to keep things tidy, he replied, trying to ignore the sting of envy as he watched Alex's easy confidence. He was young, ambitious, and living in a world Richard felt he could only dream about. The thought rolled through Richard's mind like a wave, the familiar weight of his reality settling on his shoulders. Every day he worked hard mopping, scrubbing, taking pride in a job well done. But in moments like this, he felt the sharp contrast between him and the people who strolled in and out of the hotel. Wondered if he would ever step out of the shadows, ever drive that sleek beast, ever become a part of something bigger. Just as Richard returned to work, wiping the floor with renewed resolve, he noticed the valet stepping away from the luxury car, keys in hand. Alex looked back at him, eyes gleaming with mischief. He said, joy bubbling in his voice. What? Richard stammered, stepping back from his mop, incredulous. No joke, Alex exclaimed, infectious excitement lighting up the space around them. You're the only one around here who's not busy. The owner's just around the corner and they need someone to drive it to the garage. Richard felt the blood rush to his head, take a luxury car for a spin. A part of him wanted to leap at the chance, while another part tugged at him, whispering that it was impossible. But I'm just the janitor, he mumbled, his confidence fading. "Yeah," Alex responded, a challenge in his tone. "You work just as hard as anyone else here. You deserve a little excitement. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Richard's heart raced with uncertainty. A part of him itched to accept, to grab this chance by the horns and drive off into a world he'd only fantasized about. But apprehension anchored him in place. What if he drove too fast? What if he crashed? Seeing Richard hesitate, Alex leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "What's the worst that could happen? Adventure." The word hung in the air like a promise. Richard felt the flicker of hope ignite within him, threatening to break free from years of routine and resignation. What was life without a little risk? He took a deep breath, pulled the confidence from the depths of his resolve, and nodded. "Okay," he finally said, heart racing with a blend of fear and excitement. Alex's face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Awesome. Moments later, Richard found himself perched in the driver's seat of the shimmering black sports car, a whole new world surrounding him. The scent of fresh leather enveloped him, and the dashboard glimmered like a treasure. All his senses heightened in that moment, and for the first time in years, he felt alive. He buckled up, hands trembling slightly as he gripped the wheel. "Breathe," he muttered, trying to calm the chaos whirling inside him. The engine purred, vibrating beneath him in a way that made his entire being pulse with a mixture of adrenaline and hope. Richard asked, glancing over at Alex as he sat beside him. "Just start it and drive it around the block," Alex said casually. Richard nodded, mustering every ounce of courage as he pressed the ignition button. The engine roared to life with an exhilarating rumble that sent chills shooting down his spine. He could feel the power beneath him, an untamed energy that echoed the dreams he'd buried deep within. As he eased the car out of the hotel driveway, everything outside blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors, bright signs, bustling people, and storefronts that seemed to stretch on forever. The car glided over the pavement as if it were a living entity, and Richard realized he was no longer just wiping floors, he was living. He pressed down gently on the accelerator, and the car leaped forward, the world disappearing into a whirlwind. Richard caught his breath, an exhilarated laugh escaping his lips. The feeling was electric, a spark igniting something within him that had been dormant for too long. It was as if the years of restraint slipped away, replaced by raw power and the promise of freedom. "See," Alex shouted over the roar of the engine. But as they approached a red light, a creeping sense of doubt interrupted his joy. Could he really handle this? What if something went wrong? He instinctively slowed down, heart pounding. Alex encouraged. Richard took a deep breath, feeling the tension begin to release. He was on borrowed time, an experience that wouldn't last forever. He needed to seize it. An urge swelled within him, pulling him forward. He hit the gas harder, adrenaline surging as he felt the car respond like a wild stallion unleashed. The rush of air whipped through the open windows, and he couldn't suppress the exhilaration, pushing past his reservations, feeling more alive than he had in ages. As they turned onto a wider road, Richard felt his confidence grow. He navigated corners with ease, taking in the voices of laughter and cheers from pedestrians who watched in awe. This was a world where he no longer just existed, but truly belonged. Then, in a moment of pure spontaneity, Richard spotted a vacant stretch of pavement, the perfect place to test the limits. The thought flickered in his mind like a flame. What if he really embraced this? What if he really felt free? He yelled to Alex, feeling an electric mixture of fear and excitement. Alex shouted back, his eyes wide with thrill. Breathlessly, Richard pressed down on the pedal, feeling the car surge forward, hurtling into a new identity. The speedometer climbed, and everything around them blurred into a dizzying whirl. The thrill of the wind, the roar of the engine, it all melded into an ecstatic symphony of liberation. But then came the realization freedom also meant responsibility. A flicker of panic threaded through his exhilaration. What if he lost control? What if the dreams he embraced shattered in an instant? The car swerved slightly as he veered around a bend, and his heart skipped a beat. He quickly steadied himself, reminding himself he was in control. "Easy, Richard," he murmured. He had driven safely for a reason, and it was about trusting himself to navigate this new terrain. His instincts kicked in, familiarity of discipline taking charge. Suppressing the urge to speed recklessly, he found a rhythm, an elegant dance between power and restraint. Then, like a wave crashing back, he realized how much he missed feeling alive. This thrill was something he had hidden away for too long. At that moment, Richard recognized the truth. The luxury of life wasn't solely about cars or riches. It was about the freedom to chase your dreams, to wake up the stories you thought were lost. In those fleeting moments behind the wheel, he was more than just Richard the janitor. He was Richard the dreamer, the driver, and the adventurer. As they neared the turn back toward the hotel, Richard felt a wave of gratitude swell within him. This experience wasn't just a joyride, it was a reminder that life could be exhilarating, vibrant, and full of surprises. Finally, he turned his head toward Alex, laughter spilling from his lips. "Thank you," Alex beamed, eyes twinkling with joy. "You did awesome, man. Felt like, I don't know, like freedom," Richard replied, the weight of those words settling deep within. Richard parked the car with a newfound sense of purpose. The engine quieted, and for just a moment he sat in silence. A feeling of warmth enveloped him, filling in the cracks of doubt that had long lingered in his heart. Just then the owner of the car approached them, a smile on his face as he took in the scene. He asked, genuine curiosity sparkling in his eyes. "Richard," exclaimed. The man looked at Richard carefully, a gleam of understanding glinting in his eyes. "You know, cars and luxury are nice, but it's the moments we create that define us." The weight of those words resonated within Richard, their simplicity striking a chord he hadn't realized needed to be heard. This wasn't just a fleeting encounter. It was a pivotal moment in a much larger narrative, a reminder that he was more than the routines that defined him. As he stepped out of the car, Richard felt a transformation taking place within him. The luxury of the experience, the chance to drive, to live, to dream had been delivered to him. It was a call to action, a push toward embracing every moment. He glanced at Alex, who was waiting with a proud smile, and in that moment Richard made a silent pact with himself. He would no longer let fear limit him. He would open himself to possibility and explore what lay beyond the routine. "Thanks, Alex," Richard said with sincerity. "Anytime, just remember it's never too late to chase those dreams," he replied, echoing the words of the car's owner. As Richard picked up his mop and went back to work, everything around him felt renewed. The floors sparkled even more brightly under the lobby lights, but it was his spirit that felt the most radiant. In the humdrum of daily tasks, he had discovered the magic of possibility. Each swipe of the mop was no longer a chore but a dance. Each laugh from the guests resonated with the beat of life he would now embrace. With newfound conviction, Richard approached life differently, welcoming every moment as an invitation to adventure. No longer just wiping floors, he was rewriting the narrative of his existence. His heart was full, and as he moved through the lobby, he realized that luxury didn't simply live behind those polished doors. It pulsed in every beat of his life, in every courageous step he took beyond the mop, beyond the lobby, and into a future that awaited. Together with the lessons of that day, he shaped the story of his journey, forever inspired to drive the luxury of living. He was wiping the lobby floor when he heard the unmistakable roar of a luxury sports car pull up outside. Richard paused mid-sweep, his heart racing at the sound. Just beyond the grand entrance of the Grand Lux Hotel, a sleek black machine sat idle, glistening in the sunlight like a promise of freedom. The engine's growl reverberated through the air, stirring something deep within him, a mix of longing and envy. Day after day, Richard found himself caught in the same routine. He had worked at this hotel for nearly a decade, hustling to keep the floors spotless while guests in designer clothes flowed in and out, oblivious to the world he inhabited. Each morning he slipped into his faded uniform and clocked in, resigned to the life of a janitor. But today felt different. The car was a wild creature just waiting to be let loose, and for a brief moment Richard allowed himself to dream. What would it be like to be behind the wheel of something like that, to feel the roar of the engine pulsing beneath his hands? Came a voice breaking his thoughts. It was Alex, the hotel valet, grinning like he just won the lottery. Richard chuckled nervously, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Just doing my job," he replied, but inside a part of him felt small, insignificant. "You know, you really could use some excitement in your life," Alex asked, gesturing toward the luxury vehicle outside. Richard replied, hardly believing what he heard. The thought sent a thrill through him, but it was quickly tarnished by the familiar weight of doubt. Who was he to think he could drive something like that? Alex urged, his tone playful yet sincere. "You work hard, man." Richard shook his head, the idea both tantalizing and terrifying. What if he made a mistake? What if he broke it? Just then the car's owner stepped out, a man in a tailored suit, moving with an air of confidence that commanded attention. He handed Alex the keys with a casual wave, completely at ease in this world of wealth. Richard watched in awe, catching glimpses of a life he barely touched but always admired from afar. Alex called out, stopping the man just as he turned to walk away. The man raised an eyebrow, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. Alex replied, his voice full of conviction, "Richard's the best here." Richard stood frozen, a wave of disbelief washing over him. Could he really do this? His heart pounded in his chest. "Come on, man," Alex encouraged, nudging Richard forward. With hesitant steps, Richard approached the car. Every part of him wanted to rush back to safety, to flee from the overwhelming excitement that lured him to the driver's seat. Yet something pushed him forward, a spark igniting within him. Perhaps this could be the moment that changed everything. "Okay, let's do this," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, and he climbed into the driver's seat. The moment he settled behind the wheel, the scent of fresh leather enveloped him like a hug. Everything around him felt surreal. He was no longer just Richard the janitor. He was now Richard the driver, ready to embark on an adventure. As he buckled his seatbelt, his hands trembled with anticipation. "Breathe," he muttered to himself. Alex leaned over, his eyes wide with excitement. Ready. With the push of a button, the engine roared to life, sending a thrill coursing through him. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The sheer power beneath him made his heart race like he was gearing up for a race of his own. The world outside flickered to life, and Richard gently pressed down on the accelerator. The car surged forward, and he could hardly contain the exhilaration flooding his senses. The city whipped by in a blur, buildings stretching toward the sky, the sound of the engine drowning out everything else. He shouted, his laughter mixing with the roar of the engine. Alex called out, but the thrill was addictive. Richard couldn't help pushing the pedal down harder, feeling the adrenaline electrify him. As he turned onto a wider street, freedom filled his spirit. Richard leaned back slightly, allowing the car to glide effortlessly beneath him. For the first time, he felt unshackled by the weight of his responsibilities. It was a taste of something greater, a fleeting moment where he dared to dream. But as they approached an intersection, panic crept in. Richard suddenly felt the pressure of reality crashing down. What if he messed up? What if this thrill came crashing to an end? He slammed on the brakes and the car screeched to a halt, just inches away from a stop sign. Alex shouted, gripping the dashboard. Richard took a few deep breaths, heart pounding in his chest. "Don't," Alex insisted, his encouragement washing over Richard like a wave. Taking a moment to gather himself, Richard pulled back into the rhythm of driving. They glided down the road together, and as the car picked up speed once more, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just a janitor, he was a man with dreams still waiting to be realized. Just then, a group of kids playing on the sidewalk caught sight of the sports car. Their eyes widened in awe and they cheered as they waved. Richard felt alive, embodying everything they dreamt of, a spirit of adventure and thrill. Without thinking, Richard floored the accelerator, the engine roaring with approval as they sped forward. The rush was intoxicating, exhilaration pulsating through his veins. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this alive, but reality lurked in the shadows and Richard's mind began to race. What if he crashed? What if something went wrong? To quiet those fears, he began to weave through the streets with a steady hand, focusing only on the road ahead. Alex cheered beside him, sensing Richard's growing confidence. Richard replied, the spell of excitement washing over him. The city opened up before them, an endless horizon full of opportunities and possibilities. He took a deep breath and steered the car into a wide bend, the tires gripping the asphalt like a dancer on a stage. The wind whipped through the open windows, carrying with it a sense of freedom that felt euphoric. In that moment of liberation, Richard realized he had been trapped by the monotony of his life. He had forgotten what it felt like to chase dreams, to live on the edge of adventure. With that realization came empowerment, a choice to break through from the ordinary. As they cruised down a street lined with tall trees, Richard felt a swell of determination rise within him. He wasn't just driving a car, he was reclaiming his dreams, daring to embrace life beyond the shadows. But soon, as they approached another intersection, the fear returned, prickling at his skin. He straightened his grip on the wheel, reminding himself that he was in control. "Just breathe," he whispered to himself, channeling the mix of fear and thrill into focus. At the end of the street, he turned back toward the hotel, his heart still thrumming with adrenaline. He exclaimed, beaming at Alex, "See, I told you." Alex laughed, the contagious joy lifting Richard's spirits even higher. As they parked and stepped out, Richard stood a little taller, feeling the weight of the experience settle into his bones. He had tasted life, even if just for a moment, and he wasn't ready to return to the mundane. The car's owner approached, a knowing smile on his face. He asked, genuinely interested. Richard replied, "I never felt anything like that." "Glad to hear it," the man said, his expression shifting to one of understanding. "Remember, it's not just about the car, it's about the experience." In that moment, Richard felt a rush of clarity. This experience had opened his eyes, drawing back the curtains on his dreams and desires. He had been living in a world of limitations, but now he saw a future ripe with possibility. As he stepped back into the lobby, a newfound sense of purpose filled him. Each sweep of the mop felt like a step towards something greater, something he had buried under layers of routine and self-doubt. He glanced around at the glowing marble floors and the laughter that danced in the air, and he embraced it all. With every sweep and scrub, Richard decided he would no longer let fear define him. Each moment became a chance to rediscover his dreams, to reignite the spark for life he thought had faded. The lobby buzzed with energy, and he smiled as he cleaned, feeling renewed. No longer just a janitor, he was an adventurer, a dreamer, chasing the thrill of life. This wasn't just about the car, it was about the journey he chose to embrace. Every day became a canvas, waiting for him to paint it with the colors of excitement, hope, and passion. And in that moment of clarity, Richard vowed to himself he would drive into the future, steering through life's twists and turns with courage. Because ultimately he'd learned that the real luxury was not in material things, but in moments that made life worth living. In every heartbeat, every rush of adrenaline, he would remember this day, the day he realized that life was waiting for him to take the wheel. He was wiping the lobby floor when the sound of a powerful engine drew his attention. Richard paused mid-swipe, his heart pounding in his chest as he turned to see a sleek black sports car pull up to the Grand Lux Hotel. It gleamed in the sunlight, sophisticated lines and polished chrome catching the eye of everyone nearby. He squinted, taking it all in, the roar of the engine, the way heads turned, the aura of glamour surrounding it. Every day felt the same as he pushed his mop across the gleaming marble floor. For 10 years, Richard had been the quiet janitor, invisible among the wealthy guests flowing in and out of the hotel, their laughter echoing through the grand hallways. He was just a man with a mop and bucket, cleaning up after their lives while he dreamt of something beyond the routine. As the valet stepped forward to greet the car's driver, Richard caught a glimpse of an elegant man in a well-tailored suit. Confidence dripped from him like perfume, and as he stepped out, the sun played off his designer sunglasses, creating an almost cinematic moment. The car was like a stage prop, perfectly positioned, and Richard felt a pang of longing. He had always admired luxury from afar. Today it felt more distant than ever. "Hey, Richard," Alex, the valet, called out with a grin. "Just doing my job," Richard replied, keeping his tone light, masking the ache of envy that tugged at him. "You should join the fun once in a while, drive one of those beauties," Alex teased, pointing toward the car as he leaned casually against the valet stand. Richard let out a half-hearted chuckle. Yeah, right, but even as he said it, the thought began to swirl in his mind. What would it be like to feel the power of that car beneath him, to be the one turning heads instead of being the background figure? Just then the car's owner strolled over, a confident smile plastered on his face. He asked, tossing the valet the keys like it was a game. Alex's eyes sparkled with mischief. He turned to Richard with a playful grin. "You up for a little adventure, my friend?" Richard gasped, disbelief flooding his voice. Alex shrugged, waving his hand dismissively. "You've been on your feet all day." The words danced around in Richard's mind. Could he really do that? The idea sent a thrill surging through him, but then a wave of self-doubt crashed over. What if he messed it up? What if he didn't know how to handle something so powerful? Alex's voice broke through his hesitation. Richard hesitated as his heart raced. He could feel the weight of the moment, the kind of chance that only comes once in a lifetime. He looked at Alex, who was nodding encouragingly. "Okay," Richard finally said, resolve settling in. The grin that spread across Alex's face was infectious as he led Richard toward the car. As Richard climbed in, he felt a cocktail of nerves and excitement bubbling within him. The moment he landed in the driver's seat, he was enveloped by the scent of new leather, the polished console inviting him like a siren's call. Alex said, practically bouncing in anticipation, his eyes alight with excitement. Richard fumbled with the seatbelt, feeling a mix of thrill and anxiety. His hands gripped the steering wheel, and with each passing second, the weight of what he was about to do pressed on him. "Just start it up and take it slow," Alex advised, his voice a steadying force. Richard pressed the ignition button, and the engine roared to life, an exhilarating growl vibrating through his core. It echoed the firing up of something deep inside him, a dormant part that felt the rush of possibility in the air. "Wow," he muttered, astonished by the power lurking beneath him. A rush of adrenaline coursed through his veins, and he envisioned himself speeding down the highway, free from the constraints of his daily life. With a deep breath, Richard shifted into gear and pulled out of the driveway. The world outside blurred into a kaleidoscope of colors. The sidewalks were alive with people, cars honked at one another, and street vendors shouted their daily specials. Richard felt untethered, liberated from the monotony of his job, a feeling he had long forgot. "Just follow that street up ahead," Alex instructed, pointing, eyes gleaming with excitement. Richard nodded, focusing intently on the road. As he pressed the accelerator gently, the car surged forward with a swift grace. It wasn't just about the thrill of speed, it was about breaking free, about tasting life in a way he hadn't allowed himself to in years. Alex asked, voice full of exhilaration. Richard laughed, a sound of pure joy spilling from his lips. The fear that had gripped him began to dissolve, replaced by a growing confidence with every turn of the wheel. He was no longer the janitor pushing a mop, he was Richard, the driver, out on the open road. As they approached a red light, a moment of panic struck. Would he be able to stop in time? Would he slam into someone? The road felt both thrilling and terrifying, and his heart raced as he slammed on the brakes. The tires squealed in protest, and the car came to a halt just inches from the line. Alex shouted, a mixture of thrill and fear in his voice. Richard gasped, trying to catch his breath, his heart still racing. "Just breathe," Alex reassured him. Richard nodded, taking a moment to steady himself. He had to conquer this fear, to push through the boundaries he had set for himself. He inhaled deeply, centering his focus. He pressed down on the accelerator once more, feeling the surge of power return. The sun shining through the windshield felt like a warm embrace. The wind whipped through the open window, invigorating and freeing. The streets became a blur as Richard regained his momentum. He could almost see himself weaving through the life he had always wanted, the laughter, the thrill, the taste of freedom. Alex cheered, his voice full of encouragement. With every twist and turn of the road, Richard began to feel invincible. He imagined each rush of the engine was an anthem for his rise, a melody that echoed through his heart. This was his chance to break away from the chains of routine, to explore the world beyond the lobby. Then as they pulled onto a wider avenue, Richard felt the urge to push just a little harder. The street stretched wide beneath him, beckoning him to embrace the wild. Without a second thought, he pressed down harder on the pedal. Alex exclaimed, eyes wide with surprise. The car responded, racing down the road like a stallion unleashed. Wind whipped through Richard's hair, adrenaline coursing through every vein as the scenery blurred. He felt weightless, unburdened, living in the moment. But just then sharp thoughts pierced the thrill. What if he crashed? What if this was the moment where everything went wrong? Richard's focus flickered, and as he turned his head to glance at Alex, the panic returned. "We should slow down, I don't want to wreck this beautiful car," he said, his voice shaky. "Hey, it's just us out here," Alex urged. "Don't hold back, feel it, just be in control." Richard took a deep breath, centering himself once more. He had to remind himself that this was a moment to savor, not fear. He steadied his grip on the wheel, allowing the blend of excitement and caution to guide him into a rhythm. As they cruised through the streets of the bustling city, the rush transformed into liberation. The luxury car was an extension of himself, each curve and turn guided by his own spirit. Laughter bubbled up within him as they flew past a group of teenagers on the sidewalk, their heads snapping in surprise. Richard yelled over the engine, pointing excitedly. "Yeah," Alex called back, grinning widely. As they navigated through the streets, their joy enveloped them, and Richard let the thrill wash over him. In those moments of reckless abandon, time blended into a tapestry of laughter and speed. The world that once constrained him faded, leaving only the warmth of freedom accompanying him. Then as the road ahead narrowed, Richard's confidence began to flicker. The street was unfamiliar. Would he miss a turn? What if the car slipped from his control? Shadows of doubt danced at the edges of his clarity. "You got this." Alex's voice broke through the haze, and Richard tightened his grip on the steering wheel. But just as his confidence began to return, a blaring horn startled him. The car veered into his lane, and Richard swerved instinctively. The world tipped, sending his heart leaping into his throat as they veered toward the curb. With a surge of adrenaline, he fought to regain control, the car responding to his every instinct. The world spun for a heartbeat as he fought against panic, but somehow he steadied his hand and navigated them back onto the road, the tires gripping firmly beneath him. Alex shouted, a mix of fear and excitement coloring his tone. Richard let out a shaky breath, heart racing. "You're a natural." Alex encouraged, laughter spilling from his lips. With the adrenaline still coursing through him, Richard leaned back into the experience, their laughter intertwining with the sounds of the city. Each turn, each acceleration became a dance, a beautiful, exhilarating ride he didn't want to end. As they neared the hotel again, Richard took one last breath of freedom. He could feel the weight of the moment settle around him, a realization washing over. This couldn't just be a one-time thing. Had to embrace this feeling of possibility, the rush of living beyond his confines. Pulling up to the valet stand, Richard shut off the engine, silence enveloping them after the roar of power. He looked at Alex, who was still buzzing with excitement. Richard exclaimed, disbelief still threading through his joy. "You did great," Alex replied, enthusiasm undiminished. As they stepped out of the car, Richard felt an electric current wash over him. The experience had transformed something deep inside. It wasn't just about driving a luxury car, it was about rediscovering himself. The thrill of life was accessible, ready for him to seize. Richard proclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. Alex cheered, fist bumping him. Then the owner of the luxury car approached them, a smile on his face. Richard's heart raced. It was incredible, glad to hear it. "Remember, it's about the experience," the man said, his eyes glinting with the wisdom of someone who understood the deeper meaning behind the thrill. "Don't let life's routine hold you back." As Richard stood there absorbing the weight of those words, he realized something vital: life was meant for living. Each moment was a chance to embrace adventure, to chase dreams without fear of failure. He could no longer hide behind the mop and bucket, waiting for something to change. It was time to grab the reins and steer his own path. As his perspective shifted, he turned back to the lobby, the sparkle of the marble floor glistening beneath the overhead lights, a canvas waiting for color. Instead of viewing his job as a burden, he would approach it as an opportunity. Each sweep of the mop would be a step toward embracing his newfound awareness. With a lighter heart and invigorated spirit, Richard went back to work, feeling the rhythm of life pulse through him. Each laughter echoed around him, each guest that smiled served as a reminder that he was worthy of joy, worthy of adventure, no matter his station in life. No longer just a janitor, he would take the lessons of that day with him, driving into the future with purpose. Each day would be an opportunity to inject joy into the mundane, to embrace the journey of living fully. And in that moment of clarity, Richard vowed to himself that he would chase the thrill of life every single day, steering away from the shadows and into the light, transforming each ordinary moment into something extraordinary. He was wiping the lobby floor when he first caught sight of it, a sleek black sports car glinting under the fluorescent lights of the Grand Lux Hotel. The engine purred like a restless beast, a sound that sent an electric thrill through Richard's veins as he paused mid-swipe, mop in hand, his heart racing in tandem with the idle growl of the luxury vehicle. For years, Richard had taken pride in his work, spending long hours behind a mop and bucket while the world of glamour flowed by like a fast-moving river. In his faded blue uniform, he blended into the background, just another invisible cog in the grand machine of high-end hospitality. But that day felt different. The car stirred something in him, a longing that had long simmered beneath the surface. As he gazed at the vehicle, he wondered what it would be like to drive something that exuded such power and elegance. What would it feel like to be the one behind the wheel, to command the road instead of simply cleaning the mess left behind by those who lived the high life? "Hey, Richard," called out Alex, the hotel valet, with a playful swagger fit for the catwalk. Richard forced a chuckle, brushing away the sudden wave of envy that rose within him. "Just doing my job," he replied, trying to sound upbeat despite the discontent that clung to him like an old stain. Alex joked, tossing a set of car keys in the air. Richard laughed in response, but the jest stung deeper than he wanted to admit. He was used to being the invisible worker, always cleaning up after the show, never part of it. What would it take to change that? He pushed the thought aside as he returned to his task, but the allure of that car lingered like a ghost. Moments later, a confident figure stepped out from behind the car, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. The man radiated self-assuredness, his sunglasses glinting as he surveyed the world around him. He strolled toward Alex, who stood grinning ear to ear. He asked nonchalantly, tossing the keys to Alex as if they were a prize to be won. Richard's heart leaped. What was happening? He could hardly believe his eyes when Alex looked over at him with a glimmer of mischief. "You're up," Richard sputtered, disbelief washing over him. "You can't be serious, me." Alex called back, waving him over with enthusiasm. "Just think about it." The man in the suit glanced over, eyebrow arched in curiosity. He asked, amusement twinkling in his eye. "He's the best worker here," Alex replied confidently. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Richard's heart raced with excitement and fear. Could he really do this? A part of him wanted to leap at the chance, while another part clung to his everyday reality. He hesitated, doubts clawing at him. "Come on," Alex pressed, sensing Richard's hesitation. As he stood in that moment of indecision, a flicker of hope ignited within Richard. Wasn't it time to break free from the ghosts of his past? With one deep breath, he finally replied, "All right." Alex's grin widened as he led Richard toward the car. Stepping into the driver's seat felt surreal, almost like a scene from a movie. The interior gleamed, a perfect blend of luxury and power. He could smell the fresh leather, and everything about it felt intoxicating. Alex prompted. Richard laughed nervously as he fastened his seatbelt, heart pounding in his chest. There was no going back now. With a flick of the ignition, the engine roared to life, a sound that vibrated through his bones and lit a fire in his spirit. He pulled out of the hotel driveway, the engine growling as they hit the road. Richard felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. With each press of the accelerator, he felt more alive than he had in years. Alex encouraged, his excitement infectious. As they cruised past city streets, Richard couldn't believe how the world transformed around him. The buildings seemed taller, brighter. Everything felt different from the driver's seat of that luxury car. He pressed the pedal down a little harder, and the car leaped forward with a ferocity that left him breathless. He shouted, laughter spilling from his lips, mixing with the roar of the engine. Suddenly, Richard spotted a group of children playing soccer in a nearby park. Their faces lit up as they caught sight of the car, and their cheers ignited something inside him. Something that whispered that he was more than the man with the mop. In that moment of shared joy, he felt alive completely, unmistakably alive. Alex said, and Richard could only nod, the thrill overwhelming him. He pressed down harder on the gas pedal, the car roaring to life as they sped past the park. He could feel the wind whipping through his hair, the exhilarating sensation pulling him deeper into the moment. But then reality snuck back in, a flicker of doubt changing the thrill to anxiety. What if he lost control? What if he crashed? The thoughts gnawed at him, and just when he thought he had banished them, a sharp corner loomed ahead. Alex urged, sensing Richard's hesitance. With a determined breath, he gripped the wheel tighter. He moved with confidence, navigating the turn with a newfound sense of awareness. But as they hit the straightaway, the feeling shifted from exhilarating to terrifying. The need for speed pulled him, and without thinking, Richard pressed the accelerator even harder. The car surged forward, and his heart raced faster than his thoughts could keep up. Alex yelped, excitement morphing into a hint of fear. Richard glanced at the speedometer, his breath catching in his throat. They were moving faster than he'd ever imagined possible, and for a moment the thrill spilled over into panic. He thought of the consequences. What if he crashed? What if he ended this whirlwind in burning metal? Alex shouted. Richard blinked away the chaos, focusing on the road ahead. He couldn't back down now if he could just keep his composure. With every beat of his heart, he reminded himself that adventure often came with a price, and he had to embrace that. As the adrenaline surged, Richard felt the tension in his shoulders drop. He was finally living. The road opened up before him, and he pushed back against the fear that had held him captive for too long. He could be more than just a clean floor, he could be a force of nature. As they neared the hotel again, the feeling of exhilaration morphed into something deeper. He realized that this wasn't just about a joyride. It was about choice, about taking the reins of his life and steering himself towards something better. With one last sweeping turn, Richard pulled the car back into the valet area, his heart still racing. The thrill faded into a soft warmth, the rush of life lingering in the air. He parked the car and turned to Alex, a smile spreading across his face. "I did it." "Of course you did, Alex cheered, clapping Richard on the back, pride gleaming in his eyes. Richard stepped out of the car and reality washed over him. It wasn't just about racing through the streets, it was about embracing that spirit of adventure, about allowing himself to feel alive. He had stepped out of the shadows, out of the routine, and into something vibrant and real. Just then, the owner of the luxury vehicle approached them, a flicker of surprise on his face. He asked. Richard exclaimed, the excitement bubbling over. "Good to hear," the man replied, a knowing smile creeping onto his lips. "Remember, life is too short to let opportunities slip away." In that moment, the words hit Richard like a jolt of electricity. This experience wasn't just a one-off thrill, it was a wake-up call. He had spent too long as a spectator in his own life, hiding behind mops and buckets, feeling invisible. Now he understood that he could chase his dreams if he only dared to take the wheel. As Richard returned to his daily tasks, everything felt different. The lobby hummed with life, laughter and chatter echoing around him as he mopped the floor. Each stroke of the mop was infused with a new energy, a reminder of the adventure he had just experienced. With every swipe, he felt the memories of that day solidify within him. It was more than a joyride, it was a promise to himself, a commitment to chase the life he'd only dreamed of. No longer just the man behind the mop, he was a man of possibilities, ready to steer his own path. With a renewed sense of purpose, Richard embraced every moment, a smile here, a laugh there, and a glimmer of hope in his heart. He knew the road ahead might be filled with challenges, but he was finally ready to embrace the journey, knowing he had the power to choose his destination. In the end, it wasn't just a luxury car, it was the catalyst for a newfound determination. He was ready to drive into tomorrow, and nothing would hold him back. He was wiping the lobby floor when the roar of a powerful engine cut through the air, snapping Richard from his monotony. The sound echoed like thunder, sending a shiver down his spine. His instinctive glance toward the entrance revealed a sleek black sports car rolling to a stop, its metal skin glinting under the opulent chandelier overhead. Richard caught his breath, a knot forming in his stomach. Cars like that rolled past his work every day, a silent parade of wealth that both attracted and repelled him. Each arrival reminded him of the gulf between his reality and the world of the affluent guests he served. He brushed his brow, wiping away not just the sweat, but also the frustration that lingered there. He was just a janitor at the Grand Lux Hotel, a man with a mop and bucket, cleaning up after the dreams and desires of others. Day after day, he watched the glamorous life unfold around him, and each moment only deepened the ache inside. He had ambitions, dreams that once sparkled brightly in his mind, but they had dimmed over the years, buried under bills, responsibilities, and the weight of a paycheck that barely kept his family afloat. Just then, Alex, the hotel valet, walked past with a grin plastered on his face. "Hey, Richard, still cleaning?" Richard forced a smile. Alex laughed, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. Richard chuckled to mask his genuine envy. A part of him felt the urge to dream, to imagine what it would be like to feel the power of that car, to be in control of something so magnificent. Just for a moment, he allowed himself to picture it, the wind rushing through his hair, the feeling of speed and freedom, the envy of everyone watching. As if reading his thoughts, Alex approached the car, chatting with the driver, who emerged looking dapper in an upscale suit, sunglasses perched on his nose. The valet gestured toward Richard, exchanging a few words. "Hey, Richard," Alex called out, his excitement bubbling over. Richard lifted an eyebrow in curiosity, moving toward them. "This gentleman here needs someone to drive his car to the garage," Alex asked, eyeing Richard with that mischievous grin. Richard blinked, his heart skipping a beat. "Dead serious, you've cleaned this place more than anyone. It's time you enjoyed a little luxury," Alex urged. The driver chuckled, glancing at Richard with an assessing gaze. Richard felt the air in his lungs tighten. A part of him wanted to run away, the other part itched with a spark of possibility. He could feel eyes on him, the unseen weight of judgment lingering in the air. What if he crashed? What if he failed? Every fear surged within him, battling the growing excitement that threatened to overtake that doubt. Alex's voice broke through the storm in his mind. "You won't regret it." Richard stared at the pristine car, the engine humming softly as though beckoning him. Life was passing him by, and here was a chance that might never come again. After a moment of contemplation, he squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and nodded. "All right," Alex beamed. With every step toward the car, adrenaline coursed through Richard's veins. He climbed into the driver's seat, the leather enveloping him like a second skin. Felt alive, as if waiting for him to take charge. He inhaled the scent of luxury and grasped the steering wheel, his heart hammering. Alex said, hopping into the passenger seat, his grin stretching from ear to ear. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he fastened his seatbelt and turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, vibrating through him, filling him with an intoxicating sense of power. In that instant, he was no longer the janitor. He was Richard, the driver, ready to conquer the road. "Just take it easy at first, then feel the power," Alex instructed, his tone eager. Richard nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. He shifted into gear and pulled out of the hotel driveway, the sound of the engine echoing in his ears like a battle cry. Each turn of the wheel sent waves of exhilaration through his guts. The city unfolded before him, a vibrant tapestry of life and movement, and he felt like a part of it for the first time. As they struck out onto the main road, Richard leaned into the moment, the adrenaline coursing through him. He pressed down gently on the gas pedal, feeling the car leap forward, almost as if it had a personality of its own. Delight washed over him, illuminating the dull corners he had allowed to fester in his life. "See," Alex hollered, pumping his fist in the air. Richard laughed, his fears melting away under the weight of exhilaration. They zipped past buildings, the blur of traffic becoming a symphony of colors. The world had shifted. It was no longer about being the man behind the mop, it was about the rush of life. As they drove deeper into the city, Richard felt more alive than he had in years. He soaked in the sights, the sidewalk cafes, families enjoying day out, and other luxury cars that seemed to give a nod of appreciation to their own kind. Suddenly, Alex pointed to a wide-open stretch of road ahead. "You've got some space here." Richard's pulse quickened as he glanced at the speedometer. His heart raced in rhythm with the engine. There was a wild freedom calling him, beckoning him to push the boundaries just a little more. Richard shouted, a laugh escaping his lips. He pressed his foot down harder and the car surged forward, a handful of raw power beneath him. Everything fell away. The noise of the city faded, replaced by the rush of wind and engine. He could feel it, the thrill of speed, the liberty of chasing a dream he hadn't even known he still possessed. But moments later, reality snapped back into focus, the joy giving way to a cold realization. A blur of red lights flashed ahead as a car suddenly cut into his lane. Panic surged through Richard, his heart thudded heavier. He slammed his foot on the brakes and the tires screamed in protest. Time slowed. Everything felt surreal as the world around him became a blur of color and sound. The car swerved and Richard fought to regain control, his breath growing shallow. He could feel the weight of every choice he'd ever made pressing down on him, every fear he had hidden, every moment he had passed by without seizing the chance. Alex shouted, gripping the dashboard. He urged. With adrenaline surging, Richard focused all his energy on the road ahead. I can't crash this beautiful car, he thought. He steadied his grip, feeling something click inside him. This wasn't just a ride, it was a moment. He let off the brake and accelerated, the engine roaring back to life, filling him with newfound determination. Richard guided the car around the other vehicle, barely avoiding a collision, the relief washing over him like a tide while exhilaration surged again. Alex exclaimed, laughter intertwining with disbelief. Richard exhaled sharply, the thrill mingling with a sense of accomplishment. He couldn't remember the last time he felt this alive, this unrestrained. The experience awakened something long dormant in him. As they continued, Richard drove with pride. He maneuvered through bursts of traffic and found easing turns. With every mile, he reclaimed pieces of himself that life had nestled away, dreams that had faded into the background, ambitions that had collected dust. Alex asked, grinning, clearly loving every moment of this adventure. I never thought I'd be doing something like this. It's like I'm breaking free, Richard replied, conviction fueling his words. Alex cheered, this is what life is about, man. With each mile they conquered, Richard reveled in the freedom, no longer just the janitor wiping the lobby floor, but a man seizing his moment. He had stepped out of the shadows, embracing joy instead of shying away. But as they neared a busy intersection, the feeling of elation turned into uncertainty. The world was buzzing and the sudden realization hit him. Could he really keep this up? What if it all fell apart? What if he wasn't good enough? The doubts crept back in, clawing at his spirit. Then, just as they approached a red light, the darkness briefly swallowed him. Would he crash and return to a life of invisible toil? A consuming fear sneaked back in, slapping him back into reality. Panic surged, and he applied the brakes just as a voice broke through, steady and calm. Easy, Richard, you've got this. The sound of Alex's encouragement pierced through the haze of uncertainty. Richard took a deep breath and wrestled with the shadows that threatened to pull him down. I'm not going back, he thought resolutely. The light turned green and he stepped on the accelerator with renewed conviction, but just as they rolled forward, another car rushed past them. The driver honked fearfully and Richard winced at the near miss. Whoa, Alex shouted, the cheer in his tone tinged with concern. Richard's heart raced again, not just from the thrill, but from the weight of realization. This wasn't just a joyride, it was a test. He had to confront more than roadblocks, he had to face himself. As they continued, Richard weaved through the streets, the weight of his past clinging to him. The car wasn't just a machine, it was a reflection of the freedom he had long craved. Each moment connected him to a piece of who he was, a vibrant spirit trapped beneath layers of grime. But then, a loud crack shattered the air. Richard jolted, eyes wide at the sight of a massive truck weaving through traffic, heading straight for them. The collision felt inevitable, a moment of fate nearing. And just as they braced for impact, Richard swung the wheel hard to the left. Time slowed. The world around him went silent as he desperately searched for an escape. Adrenaline shot through him and he felt alive, truly alive for the first time as fear transformed into unfettered determination. The truck swerved, barely missing them, and Richard managed to regain control. Breathing heavily, he turned to Alex, who was white-knuckled and wide-eyed, still processing what just happened. Alex staggered, disbelief painting his face. Richard exclaimed, a mix of relief and exhilaration surging through him. As they caught their breath, Richard glanced back at the road ahead and realized that it had changed forever. It wasn't just a career, he had faced down a part of himself that had kept him trapped. This ride transformed into much more than a moment behind the wheel. It was a window into a life where he wouldn't settle for mediocrity. Richard urged, his heart still racing, feeling the electricity of the experience pulse through him. But just as they prepared to accelerate again, the engine sputtered. Richard's heart sank as the car began to shudder, suddenly losing power. He shouted, panic gripping him. The steering wheel jerked and the car lurched to the side, coasting to a stop right in the middle of the intersection. Richard stared ahead, dismay washing over him. Alex exclaimed, peering around as cars began to pile up behind them, horns blaring in frustration. The once thrilling experience turned ominous, like a storm cloud closing in. Richard's heart thumped heavily in his chest, self-doubt creeping back into the corners of his mind. Had he pushed too far? Had the adventure taken everything away? As he struggled to figure out what to do next, he glanced in the rearview mirror, only to freeze at the sight of flashing red and blue lights approaching rapidly. In that moment, everything hung in the balance. Choices spun in the air like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. Richard's world narrowed down to a single question. Could he reclaim the moment, or would he be swallowed whole by the fears he had fought so hard to overcome?